From the Oklahoma Newsroom, this is an OU update. I'm Jenny Carlson. Oklahoma's soon-to-be, they hope, professional players, football players going to the NFL draft, having their pro day on Wednesday down in Norman. Brooke Pryor joins us to talk about some of these guys. Brooke, several Sooners went to Indianapolis to the Combine. They got to work out at least to some degree there in front of everybody, every team from the NFL sending representatives. But the guys, there's a bunch of guys that didn't go to the Combine who are draft eligible from OU. Who do you expect to maybe have the most to show at Pro Day down at OU?
Well, I think the obvious answer there is Joe Mixon. You know, he's one of the guys who was not at the Combine. Did not get invited, likely stemming from the 2004 punch. The NFL's really tried to make an emphasis on not inviting guys who have violent backgrounds or have, you know, been charged with assault or convicted of assault or anything like that. So Joe Mixon was not there. However, he still managed to be, I think, the most talked about player that weekend in Indianapolis. Just teams saying that they were really frustrated that they couldn't get him up there to see what he had, you know, kind of bring him to them all in one place. And instead, now all these teams are going to have to come out to OU's Pro Day and kind of see what he's all about. You know, they've heard, you know, Bob Stoops and Lincoln Riley and his teammates talk about what a great guy he is. They've seen the film. They've seen the video of the punch. They've seen everything, but the one thing they haven't been able to do is see Mixon for themselves, doing their drills, running the 40, all of that. So I think for Joe, this is a huge opportunity to bolster his draft stock. You know, right now I'm seeing him going in the third round. That's pretty much across the board the projection. But if he has a good pro day and a team's willing to take him, he could go in the second round. I don't think he's first round, but he could go in the second round.
Yeah, and obviously what he does in those timed and those measured events, you know, will be important to some degree, but I think people widely regard him as a great talent. It's going to be that off-field, those interviews, those interactions with teams. Obviously, a team that's really interested will probably fly him to their location to do more, but how he interacts with these team personnel members, Brooke, I have to think that's as vital as anything when it relates to Joe Mixon.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he missed out on the opportunity to go to Indianapolis and go through this kind of gauntlet of interviews that they do. You know, there's press conferences, there's one-on-one meetings, there's different tests that they have to do. And the teams, I think, were the most frustrated, like you said, not because they didn't get to see the timed events, but because they didn't get that chance to kind of go through speed dating-like interviews and just rolling through there with the rest of the guys. And now they have to spend more money and more resources to talk to him, you know, outside of the Combine. You know, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for them. These NFL teams have millions of dollars. If they have to buy an extra plane ticket or two to evaluate Joe Mixon, that's just the way it goes. But they did take time to express their frustration in that this weekend.
Yeah, and by the way, there is an NFL rule that precludes certain guys from going to the Combine, as Brooke mentioned before. But the way I read the rule, Joe Mixon had that Alford plea, wasn't actually found guilty of anything per se. Because of that, I think he would have technically been allowed to go, but the NFL taking a stand, as Brooke mentioned, against players that do have violence in their background. So we shall see how that goes on Wednesday. But Brooke, as I mentioned earlier, you know, lots of guys, even D.D. Westbrook, who went to the Combine, didn't do all the drills, so I'm expecting he'll do some things in Norman. But some other guys that, you know, had great Sooner careers, had great impact on the Sooners, will be having a chance to get in front of these scouts. Guys like Jordan Evans, Ahmad Thomas, on down the list. What are you expecting to see, and are there any particular guys that you're sort of curious to see how they do out there?
Yeah, I think the two guys you just mentioned that I'm the most curious to see are Jordan Evans and Ahmad Thomas, because they didn't get that chance in Indianapolis. You know, Jordan thought that he might get an invite to the Combine. He had a really strong second half of the season, you know, really good tape, and I think he would have done really well in interviews, but he's just one of those guys that did not get that invitation. And so with that perceived slight, he's going to come out working out really hard at Pro Day. He and Ahmad have been training together in Ohio. They have the same agent, going through the same kind of drills and preparation. And I think that Jordan is one of those guys who maybe when he got to Norman didn't see him as an NFL talent, even after the Texas Tech game, but he's someone who's really turned it around, and I'm interested to see how he tests tomorrow. And same thing with Ahmad, but a little bit different storyline. He had a really good junior season, and then senior season dropped off. He kind of explained to me that it was because of the way they were playing, though they were, lacking some guys in the secondary with Zach Sanchez leaving. So they had to kind of shift, and he was out of his comfort zone for a lot of the year and just couldn't seem to make that transition. So he's hoping that whatever team uses him or wants him will put him back in a position to succeed. And he has taken what he struggled in this year and I think really tried to learn from it, and now is ready to prove to these NFL teams that, he can handle being out of his comfort zone, and, hey, here's what he can do when he is in a position to succeed.
Hey, lastly, Brooke, a guy, you mentioned how much Joe Mixon was talked about during the Combine. Another wildly interesting, in my estimation, guy that's out there is another Sooner, or a former Sooner, Charles Walker. He played a few games for the Sooners this year, defensive line, then left the team, essentially sort of a lot of questions about, was he injured? Was he afraid to get injured again? Was it something else? Great talent, a guy that, I think we've all seen talked about amongst draft gurus as being really a top-notch defensive line talent. But where will he land, and what questions were asked and answered about his departure from OU? What have you heard about Charles Walker at this point?
Well, I think that for Charles Walker, coming out of the Combine weekend and not ending up on any of the biggest loser lists is an advantage to him, and that when websites put out, the list of biggest winners and biggest losers for Combines, Charles Walker's a guy that had a lot to gain from this Combine. He's essentially been preparing for this since he left the team in November. I don't know that he stood out because I also haven't seen him on any of the winners lists. He ran a 4.96 40. He had a 28-inch vertical and did 25 reps on the bench press, 5 less than Samaje Perine did, by the way. And I think that for him, the biggest benefit of going to the Combine were those interviews. I'm sure teams asked, hey, why did you leave? And so hopefully they were able to get some clarity on that. I am hoping that we will be able to get some clarity on that. I have heard that he is likely going to be working out at OU tomorrow on Wednesday. So it will be interesting to see kind of if we learn anything from that and who shows up to evaluate him further.
Yeah, a lot of interesting things yet to be seen. You mentioned Samaje Perine and all those bench presses. There are a lot of guys that didn't do as many bench presses as Samaje Perine. 30 for the Sooner running back at the Combine, an unbelievable total. We'll have lots more measurements, lots more times and weights and all sorts of goodness from OU Pro Day on Wednesday. Be sure to stay with newsok.com for all of those updates as the day goes on. And be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.